Here's a look at Michael Andretti as he came into his pit. It is worth noting that Mears' pit is forward of his. You saw the yellow car go by. That was Rick Mears heading toward his pit.
All right, now this looks to be a routine stop for both. That is to say they're changing 3 tires, not the left front, which hardly wears at all, but the other 3, and refueling. The fueling should be fast at this point because the tanks behind the pit walls are full and there's plenty of gravity pushing the fuel into the cars. But you can see what happened. Rick Mears, pitted by the Penske crew, gets out of there before Michael Andretti, pitted by the Preco crew. Round 1 in the pit stop to the Penske team, which incidentally won the pit stop competition that they have here.
Indeed, it was Danny Sullivan's crew that won the pit stop competition, but all of the Penske teams are brilliant at the task. And there is the leaderboard at this moment. You can see that Mears and Michael Andretti are 3 and 4. I think we can assume from that that Unser Jr. and Fittipaldi have not yet entered the pit. So Mears and Andretti will be going back to the top of the leader chart when that occurs. There's a look at Al Unser Jr. right there in the red, white, and blue car on your screen. He is the man who is listed for the moment as the leader. And behind him, number 20, Fittipaldi. Now, Unser Jr. is going to go another lap. You can stretch it to as far as perhaps 32 laps without having to go in for fuel. No farther than that, though.
The Doug Shearson team, for whom Al Unser Jr. drives, has a man named Ian Reed in the pits. One of these sort of subculture engineers that has become such an important part of the winning of this race. Not a mechanic, not a driver, not a team owner, but an engineer whose job it is just to study the fuel consumption. So they are trying to stretch it. Certainly, this is effective. Should a yellow flag come out suddenly, you see, Al Unser Jr. would be able to stop under that yellow. It would be a major coup for it. So there's some reason to be staying out there right now. Incidentally, as you see him, he did stretch it a couple of laps further than anybody else. The lead, incidentally, Rick Mears' lead has been stretched to 6.5 seconds. So he was the fastest car on the track before the exchange of pit stops, which of course benefited it. He's now pulling away from Michael Andretti.
But we're just a little bit more than 110 miles into the race. Hard for me to believe that Mears would want to make any definitive statement at this time.
A good stop. You see the clock running in the upper right would be about 16 seconds at this stage. You see Little Al had a quick drink of water there or something anyway. Right, a little bit over the 16, but that's a very, very competent stop. Nothing went wrong. Remember, this is a team sport for those 16 to 20 seconds that car is stopped. The driver has nothing to do about it. It's the 5 men over the wall making the pit stop that advance the cause of the car.
Unser Jr. went 32 laps between pit stops. That is the fuel limit. Let's join Jim McKay.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. For the first 40 laps, certainly, this was a very graphic demonstration of the changing of the guard here at Indianapolis. A son, Michael Andretti, half the age of his father, taking the lead in the race, while at the same time, his father very early on, started way back in the 10th row, was forced to withdraw with a problem with the engine in his car, with the electrical system. We keep talking about the bad luck that his dog Mario Andretti here. Let me give you just some idea of the things that have happened to him through the years. Go way, way back to 66. Engine detonation, burned piston, wrecked. Burned piston, broken piston, wreck, broken header, engine seized, and then in 1982, 83, and 84, accident. Last year, of course, he finished second. But now the race leader is Rick Mears. This was a race, if you've just joined us, that didn't get started for almost 40 minutes late. And that was because Tom Sneva had an accident before the green flag fell. The race was red flagged and restarted, as I said, some 40 minutes later. This was Sneva's car, which coming into the second turn on the pace left, suddenly turned left, went into the wall. Tom told us later that even now he has no clue, no idea what happened. Ironically, it's almost the same spot where he crashed some years ago. Let's take a look now at the official standings after 46 laps. Al Unser Jr. was the leader at that point, but he had not made a pit stop under the green, and most of the people had. He has now pitted, so these standings have changed, and Rick Mears again is the leader. But these are the official standings at the end of 46 laps. You can take a look at them, but take them with that grain of salt that at the point some of the people had pitted and others had not. A.J. Foyt there in 15th place, by the way, has moved up quite a few spots, so he is charging. Tony Bettenhausen back there, the son of a famous race driver. and the others going down to 30th place. Dick Simon, the 52-year-old, is still in it, the oldest driver ever to drive at Indianapolis. Mario Andretti was the second man to go out, and Tom Sneva was the first. Those out of the race then. Sneva on the pace lap, Andretti engine failure after 29. Now back to Jim Lampley.
All right, thank you very much, Jim McKay. So it is 31 and not 30 cars still on the track after well more than 100 miles in the Indianapolis 500. You look at Rick Mears, the man who was the pole sitter, set an all-time qualifying record for the race. He is the leader right now. That's stretching that lead just a little bit over Michael Andretti. One note for future reference, Sam Posey. Emerson Fittipaldi went 34 laps between pit stops. That's a useful piece of information later in the race.
Sure is.
All right, we'll be back with our live coverage of the Indianapolis 500 right after this. We are back live at the Indianapolis 500. You see that the yellow flag is out. There was a piece of debris of some sort, perhaps a piece of metal, in turn one, and while it is being removed from the track, Rick Mears tours the speedway as the leader under the yellow. Now, cars which have been lapped filter into the single file line here. They do not make a line of their own, as is the case in stock car racing, so don't be confused by what you see on the track. These are the leaders as they stand right now. Mears is number one, Ray Hall is number two, Michael Andretti is still up there. We've already seen a couple of important pit stops, and while we have a moment here with the cars touring under the caution flag, we're going to take a little bit more detailed look at exactly what happens when a car comes into the pit.
In this demonstration of an Indy pit stop, you see that in a sense, this is very much a team sport, and that the 5 men allowed by the rules to work on the car are, for a few moments at least, actual participants in the race. In a typical stop, they will change 3 of the 4 tires and refill the 40-gallon tank, all in about 15 seconds. Let's look at the jobs that each of the team members performs. As pneumatic jacks raise the car, the fuel hose is locked in place. A special coupling system prevents spillage. Fuel flows into the car at 3 gallons per second. Simultaneously, the 3 men changing tires begin work. Despite their apparent haste, notice that they actually use their air-powered wrenches with great care, knowing that a mistake, a stripped wheel nut, for example, will put the car out of the race. The driver, so used to 200 miles an hour, is actually disoriented during the stop and wants to get going, fully aware that for every second spent in the pits, he could have traveled 100 yards on the track.
We are back, and still under the yellow flag, 34-year-old Rick Mears of Bakersfield, California, now Reading, Pennsylvania, still the leader in the race. Bobby Rahal second, Danny Sullivan third. You do not see the name of Michael Andretti there, as he has been shuffled back a bit by the sequence of pit stops, back in 8th place. We'll be back after more racing, after these messages and a word from our local stations. In a quarter of the way through the 1986 Indianapolis 500, Mears, Rahal, Unser Jr., Kevin Cogan, Emerson Fittipaldi, who, as I mentioned before, went 34 laps between pit stops. That may mean that he is getting better fuel economy than some of the other cars in the race. And now, as they come down the front straightaway, Rick Mears will see a green flag from Dwayne Sweeney, and he'll take off.
Take off is exactly what he'll do, because his nearest competition, as things were sorted out by that group of pit stops, is well behind him on the track, and Rick Mears now has a full lap of clear track ahead of him. We're going to see him pile up, I'd say, in the next 10 or 15 minutes, what could be a decisive advantage at this point.
Well, you have to go back through about 4 lapped cars there to find Rahal in second place. So Mears has quite an opportunity to establish a decisive lead, at least for this stage of the race. And meanwhile, let's go down to Al Troutwig for a report from the pits. Al? Temporarily, we have a problem with Mr. Troutwig's transmission system, and we'll get that as quickly as we can. It is still status quo on the track, where Rick Mears, called by many, including his teammate Danny Sullivan, the greatest of all oval track racers, is currently plying his trade and leading on the rounded rectangle, sometimes erroneously called an oval, of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
You see the turns there. They're banked about 9 degrees. Of course, the track was built back in 1909, and at that time, they didn't anticipate a speed anything more than, there's Roger Penske, the owner, of Rick Mears' car. They didn't think the speeds were going to be any higher than about 100 miles an hour. Of course, today, those shallow banks look very flat indeed.
And look at the gap between Mears and the cars who are trying to get by traffic to chase him. Now, you saw the shot of Penske there. It's worth noting that although he owns all three cars, on race day, Roger only works with Rick Mears. There are other people who are in charge of the other two cars' efforts, but Roger Penske works directly with Rick Mears on race day. And we've already heard from Mears about the adjustments that he tries to make during the course of the race. Here is what he told us about Roger Penske's role.
Well, he really, keeps tabs on all the fuel, what kind of mileage, he doesn't calculate fuel himself. He's got somebody that does. But he keeps tabs on when, what time frame our next stop's going to be in, and really gets all of that organized and watches the rest of the field and what everybody else is doing and what things may be taking place that would bring it into play that when we may need to come in. If it'd be better to wait a little bit longer, if something looks like it's getting ready to take place that, may change the circumstances or something. He's just got a knack for really looking at the overall picture and making a split decision quick on when to do this and when to do that. It's a tremendous help.
Sam Posey, Roger loves to say that there is no first, second, or third car on his team, but is not Mears first among equals there?
First among equals is exactly right. But as the race progresses, there is cooperation amongst the team to the extent that if anybody running one of Penske's three cars learns something about the track conditions through a radio transmission from his driver or something, that word will then spread to the other two cars. So whenever they can take advantage of information, they do so. But Roger long ago realized that from a tactical standpoint, it was better not to try to run the team as a three-car team. One guy going out sort of as a rabbit, let's say, to wear down the opposition, the sort of thing you do in long-distance racing, having a couple of guys hang back. Just better to give all three guys the best opportunity and let them run for it.
Well, there's a long way to go, but for the moment, this is not so much a race as a royal procession for Rick Mears. As you can see, the now quite sizable gap between him and the cars which are chasing him. He has gunned that lap speed up to about 201.8 miles per hour, nearly 202. And there goes Rahal, who has finally cleared the traffic between himself and Mears and finds himself nearly 10 seconds behind.
Yeah, we'll start to watch that gap, but Mears has literally exploded away. An interesting point you brought up earlier, Jim, was that so few cars were out of the race, only 2 or 3 so far. Why is that? I think the reason is that the English manufacturers, March and Lola, supplied the cars to the teams so early this year. They got them, some of the teams, in January and February. They've been able to sort these cars out and test them more than ever before. We're going to look at the gap now between first and second. Rahal is the red car just now appearing in the center of your screen. You'll see that gap around 9 seconds. So,
and what does more cars on the track mean? Let's talk practically about it, because what it means is more turbulence. And more turbulence means a higher premium on driving ability. It's better to be Rick Mears in this situation.
Yeah, it's funny to talk about it, though, isn't it, when he's absolutely by himself, because he has almost that whole lap to run before he catches the tail enders again. But turbulence is a factor, and I think it's one reason that you see the cars running relatively far apart. What is turbulence exactly? It just means that the air going over the car it begins to burble and bubble. And to follow a car directly behind it means that your helmet is knocked from side to side. The handling of your car is affected. Nobody wants to have to run, let's say, less than 2 car lengths behind another car. And so they tend to give themselves a little distance, a 3 or 4 car length cushion. And then when the moment comes to actually make the pass, they sort of grit their teeth in a couple of grim laps, and then they hope they get the pass made.
Indeed, it was Rahal who told you that in turbulence, you feel like you're at the end of a string out there, just being bobbed along by the air currents, feeling somewhat like a kite.
Well, I think it's not just a question of being unhappy or discomfited by it. The point is that in really bad turbulence, and I've experienced this, your head is thrown around so much you can't even really focus on the car directly in front of you. I mean, that's the liability out there.
We are piling up laps here. 64 of them down now for Rick Mears, 64 of them down now for Bobby Rahal, but there were more than 10 seconds that elapsed between the time that Rick Mears completed the 64th lap and Rahal did. 10.8 seconds, presently the gap between Rick Mears 34 years old, the leader of the Indianapolis 500, and his closest pursuer, Bobby Rahal. And now let's try Al Trautwig again. Al?
Jim, as you and Sam have been wondering as to why Michael Andretti has slid, of course, from the 1-2 duel with Rick Mears. Well, actually, what happened was that Michael got lucky. You see, after his second pit stop, he switched tires. He went back on the track and felt that those tires were not giving him a very good handling ride. Then came the yellow, and quickly he came back in and put a new set of tires on. Barry Green, his crew chief, tells me that the car is handling back up to where they want it to be. Back to you.
All right, so that explains why Michael Andretti finds himself back in 6th place at the moment, but he has begun to move up. A couple of laps ago, he was back in 8th place. So Andretti may yet mount another threat during this middle portion of the race to Rick Mears. I spoke about how Mears describes it as two 250-mile races. What are some other logical ways that the driver might break this 500-mile race up in his mind?
I think it depends on the driver. I think there are only a few drivers that sincerely can bring any strategic emphasis to it, because it's the guys running up front, the guys with Penske behind them, with a couple of the other really cracked teams, and I think Michael Andretti's is one of those who really enjoy the various tactical possibilities. The other guys, quite frankly, have just got to get out there and do the best they possibly can. There on the left of your screen is Danny Sullivan. So Rick Mears is about to put a lap on his teammate. Quite an emotional moment. Now we're in the cockpit with Sullivan, right above his steering wheel, incidentally. You see that little black thing? That would be two lights live in that little area. One to show oil pressure trouble, the other fuel pressure. Everything looks okay, just the handling is bad. All right, there's Danny signaling Rick, go by on the left. That means Danny's going to stay to the right as they go into turn 1. There's Rick Mears, the leader in the Indianapolis 500 at about 1/3 distance, going by his teammate, last year's winner, as they go into turn 1.
And as you watch the ease with which Mears goes by, keep in mind that Danny Sullivan is traveling close to 200 miles per hour. Now Mears begins to pick his way through traffic once again, and here is where that turbulence we spoke of becomes a factor. There he is, darting down to the bottom, trying to pull by a lapped car, temporarily easing back for the moment, looking for another spot. Again, you see that higher line than some of the other races will take. Mears usually with the outside wheels up in the high part of the black groove around the track, so now he's a little lower as he looks for a spot to go by. That is Gary Bettenhausen right in front of him. Gary Bettenhausen, who once raced for Roger Penske, led this race for 138 laps in 1972, appeared headed for a victory. Shortly after that, after the misfortune of not being able to complete that race, Bettenhausen was injured and saw his relationship with Penske dissolve. Now Rick Mears has a relationship with Penske, and that's partially as a result, the lead in this race. We'll be back.
Test pilot.
Going by the red and white car there, which is Emerson Fittipaldi in car number 20. And with that move, Michael Andretti has suddenly moved back into 5th place. That gives us an idea, Sam Posey, that he has not lost speed, but in fact still has the kind of firepower he had at the beginning of the race.
All right, and next on his list would be Bobby Rahal, I believe. In any case, the point is that Michael Andretti, now there's Al Unser Sr. right ahead of him in the Penske car. Michael Andretti is back on fire and really moving fast. A great example, by the way, of the use of that yellow flag. I mean, strategically what he did was brilliant. As Al Trautwig reported, he spotted a bad handling situation with his car, decided to give up a few spots on the track in order to get the car right, made another pit stop under the yellow, which of course is much less costly than if you make it under the green.
And Michael did go by and waste Al Unser Sr. there for the moment. The Penske car has not been a factor in the race. It is 1 lap down as Al Unser Sr. runs for the moment back in 13th place. Michael Andretti, next on his list will be Al Unser Jr. And for the moment, he's about 15 seconds behind Unser Jr., so he'll be looking far ahead in the pack to try to find car number 30, the red, white, and blue car of Al Unser Jr. There again is Rick Mears in the yellow car, right in the middle of your screen. He continues to hold the lead as traffic piles up between him and the man who is chasing him, car number 3, Bobby Rahal.
Mears about to move probably by George Snyder there in the red car on the left of your screen. He's A.J. Foyt's teammate. Rick Mears, with almost casual ease, pulls out and around him. Still with Bettenhausen, isn't it?
Bettenhausen's drafting off at the back of him a little bit
Bettenhausen's having a beautiful drive and very aggressive at this point.
Well, this is Gary Bettenhausen's whole life outside of his family, really, is to be a part of this race. And, of course, it was an enormously emotional moment for him when he qualified on the last day of qualifying, entered the pits literally in tears, and spoke to the crowd with tears streaming down his face. Now, there's Bobby Rahal on the right of the screen. You can see that he has moved up through traffic and is now not that far behind Rick Mears. The lead that was once 10.8 seconds is now down to only a few seconds. And so Rahal did not lose contact with Rick Mears.
Rahal, as I said much earlier, is the sort of briefcase man that we've come to expect today's racing driver to be. He's an analytical man, very good at organizing sponsorships, being a behind-the-scenes leader. In the race car, he is cool, he is calculating, he's even humorous. He keeps a tremendous sense of objectivity about what's going on, and I think we're going to start to see pit stops. It's Rick Mears coming down the pit lane under the green, so remember, this really counts. Every second gained or lost here will have an enormous effect on the track.
Second sequence in a row in which Mears was the first to go into the pits, again under the green. Of course, he will be at a disadvantage if for some reason a yellow comes out during the next couple of laps. And he's going to gamble that now is the time to do it, and you see the Penske crew working as rapidly as they can.
Well, we would look for about a 16-second one still, and that's just about what he's doing. They're awfully fast. The Penske crew, obviously, so much has been said about them, but they so rarely make a mistake. Now, here's Rahal, Jim, who's come into the lead, but will pit. So, all right, they're all pitting at roughly the same moment.
Well, now is the time to do it. About 30 laps have gone by since the last time. Mears went 33 laps between pit stops. Not the 34 that Emerson Fittipaldi racked up before, but pretty close to it, and that's good news for Mears' crew as they look toward fuel mileage later in the race. Bobby Rahal's crew with their pit stop.
We'll be able to get a direct comparison as Bobby takes a drink, probably of something like Gatorade or water or some kind of mixture there. The drivers need that. It's hard work out there. And let's see, really about the same. More important is how much time do you lose coming in and going out. The time you actually spend stationary is only a part of the total picture of what you lose out on the track.
Rahal went 32 laps between pit stops. That's just about the limit. You're squeezing it if you go to 33, or especially if you go as high as 34, the way Fittipaldi did during the last sequence. Now, quickly to Jack Arute.
Jim, to the commenter, it would look as if Bobby Rahal and Rick Mears had identical stops in time. But here's the problem with Rick Mears. Peter Parrott, his crew chief, went over the wall to change the right front tire. He accomplished the task, and as he tried to yank the lug wrench off, the impact wrench, it got stuck. They were here for an extra 2 seconds just to dislodge that. So in essence, if that hadn't occurred, he would have been a little bit faster.
All right, Jack Arute, a sharp eye in those pits as you look at Kevin Cogan, who is, for the moment, the leader in the Indianapolis 500. Kevin Cogan experiencing what amounts to a year of redemption. He finally won an oval track race at Phoenix, the first race of the year. He has a new serenity about him this year. It's just a pleasure to deal with this man, and has been all month long.
All right, let's watch and see how he does with his pit stop. Remember, the bogey time is about a 17-second time. Your point about serenity is great. He told me something, he said, I always follow through now in a way that I never used to before.
If you were with us last week, you saw the videotaped replay of the highlights of the 1982 race in which Cogan's car touched off a chain reaction that knocked 3 cars out of the race before the green flag had even fallen. We asked Kevin Cogan what it was like in 1982 when, after the Indianapolis 500, he was booed at various other tracks around the circuit.
It wasn't pleasant. I went to some places, for instance, Michigan, which was owned by Roger Penske, and the 500 there, and when they did the driver introductions, I don't know how many people were in the stands, if 70 or 90,000, but I'd say 99% of them jumped up and booed, and fairly loudly. You know, it's an amazing feeling. I think unless you've had 90,000 people boo you, it's hard to really appreciate what that feels like.
There is Al Unser Jr. Incidentally, the reference to Penske was related to the fact that Cogan was working for Roger Penske at the time of that incident in 82.
You see, they have to keep the engines revved up. They're always afraid that the superheated engines might stall during the pit stop. This one is going on just a trace longer, and you see he's a little slow getting away. Not reflected so much on our clock, but he lost a couple of seconds in starting out. So that'll hurt him out on the track. Leaves Michael Andretti as the leader, but his stop has yet to come.
So we're back to square one for the moment, though Michael Andretti will be in shortly. Of course, remember, he took the second pit stop to readjust the suspension after having come in once before. Not actually the suspension, the tires is a more accurate way to say it. And he has maybe a lap or two on the others in that regard.
All right, and this, of course, we know he's going to have to pit, and we'll watch that stop with great interest, but this is where luck can intervene in the race. What if right now a yellow came out? You see what I mean? There would be an opportunity for Michael Andretti that could catapult him into, when everything sorted itself back out, a decisive lead. So there is luck in racing, but it's also how you treat your strategy throughout the race that determines whether or not you're able to capitalize on the situations that occur on the track.
We have so far had a race surprisingly free of yellows, only 2 of them once it got started. Of course, if you weren't with us at the very beginning of the race, you should not know or may not know that Tom Sneva crashed on the pace lap and was knocked out before the green flag came down. There's a look at Danny Sullivan, who for the moment is right in front of Michael Andretti, and Michael Andretti begins to stalk him as Sullivan has been an easy mark for the leading cars to pass. We asked Michael Andretti when he overcame the pressure and the identity, really, of being Mario Andretti's son.
I think when I got into Indy cars and showed that I could run competitively, I think that's when I broke through that barrier, because people started to watch me for what I was doing and not for who I am. And I think that's when it really happened. Even when I was running Super Vs and winning races in Super Vs, people still had said that, well, he's in the best equipment or whatever, which wasn't always true. And so I was always sort of had that pressure on me. But I felt once I did to show that I could run up front in an Indy car, that's when I proved it.
And there is Michael Andretti in the pits. As you saw while Michael was speaking, he ducked into pit row, so now he will surrender his lead in the race.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he better straighten his wheels out before he pulled out, because one of the crewmen knocked the wheel, and if he hadn't noticed that, he would have pulled out right into the pit wall. He noticed it, straightened the wheel out.
Still, he lost about 4 or 5 seconds when you compare the time for his pit stop with those of Mears and some of the others among the leaders. There is Emerson Fittipaldi. He is, for the moment, the leader in the Indianapolis 500. Now he is going to dive into the pits, and we will once again check to see exactly how many laps Fittipaldi got out of his car.
He pushed it too far. I think we're going to see that he went very far, because he was squiggling the car a little bit from side to side, trying to get the last bit of fuel in. Now, that could mean that his car will come in with the engine dead and have to be restarted. I'm not sure whether his engine is running or not. Let's go down to Larry Newber.
Well, I can give you the answer to those questions. The reason why Emerson went so far the first time was they were having problems controlling the boost. They could not get enough boost up. They were not using as much fuel as they normally would, and they knew it. The last time he came into pit, they only were able to... They are pretty much on target right now with what they expected. But they went further than they wanted to the first time, not because they were getting good mileage, but because they weren't using up the fuel. They couldn't get the boost turned up.
All right, very quickly, as we look at the leaders, Rahal and Mears, you clear up the question of boost for us, Sam. Rahal and Mears right next to each other there on the screen. Boost refers to pressure or pounds per square inch of pressure.
Yeah, what it really means is that the air being forced into the engine cylinder heads is being forced in at more than just the regular atmospheric pressure. It means that you can charge the cylinder head with more fuel, thus more power and more combustion. The more charging effect, turbocharging effect, you're able to use, the more power you get and the faster you go on the track. But of course it also has the downside that you use up more fuel. So you're always trying behind the wheel of the car to make the fine adjustment between too much boost, which gives you the speed you want, and too little.
But the bottom line is that what I fixed on as a possible advantage for Fittipaldi, you look at Debbie Rahal observing her husband from the pit, was in fact a disadvantage. He went 34 laps between pit stops because he couldn't get the necessary boost on the turbocharger and was using less fuel than he in fact should have been.
Well, of course, it gives him a little bit in the bank later on, but I think he'd rather have been
at
running
full power.
Strong. Yeah.
Now there is Rick Mears in the yellow car, who is chasing Rahal. Now Rahal is to the left of the screen. Mears clears traffic. George Snyder, the car between the two cars, and now Rahal has got a little bit of a lead as Mears begins to chase him again.
Lap speeds are very slow at this stage. You see Rahal on the left, only 194 miles an hour, which is surprising. The track must have come up very, very oily quickly because it started very fast.
Coming right down the front straight toward turn number 1. Rahal's lead shrinks a little bit as they go into turn 1. Now in the south short chute between 1 and 2. Back into turn 2. And they will head up the front straight, in effect going south to north on, excuse me, not the front straight, the back straight between turns 2 and 3.
Bobby Rahal powering right by, but now you know he sees Rick Mears in his mirrors. Those rearview mirrors are tiny on these cars, but they give the driver a view straight out underneath the rear wing. And you see the pursuing car very, very clearly. They're coming out of turn 4 now and headed down the front straight, right in front of where we enjoy, I think, one of the most beautiful views of this race or of any sporting event you could possibly have. Mears is having a little trouble getting by there.
But he's gotten by just now, and now you see Mears drawing a bead on Rahal again of the south short chute, going into turn number 2 and heading up the backstretch once again in pursuit of Bobby Rahal. 33-year-old Bobby Rahal from Dublin, Ohio, Denison College graduate. His car owner, Jim Truman, was celebrating his 51st birthday last week on what was supposed to be the day of the race. Bobby Rahal's a very businesslike man, as Sam Posey has pointed out. We asked him earlier what he felt was the emotional key to being a successful race car driver.
I think the key to any race is to really almost psych yourself down as much as you can, where you're not using a lot of nervous energy, where you're, you know, if you're calm, or as calm as one can be under those circumstances, you're not going to tire as easily. I think you think clear. I mean, there's just, you know, your emotions don't rule you as much as they would if you were, you know, very excited about where you were or how you were doing and what have you.
And there is the rather unexcitable Bobby Rahal as he currently holds the lead by 2.3 seconds over Rick Mears. Debbie Rahal plays a very important role in the pits. She is the chief scorer for the Rahal team.
And of course, this is the second time in 2 years that Bobby Rahal has seen that P1 sign to him here at Indianapolis. Let's go down to Jack Arute in the pits. He has a report. Jack?
Well, the first strategy move for Roger Penske and his team is taking place right now. Roger met with his rear tire changer, told him that, gentlemen, if we go in for a caution, we're going to try and change all 4 tires. And, Sam, that's unusual, but they're going to try and do it in the next caution period.
Well, they normally don't change the left front tire, Sam. Why would they elect to do it now?
Well, I thought that they did once during the race. All right, now this is a little early to pick that time. But, you know, the lap speeds are so slow right now, just in the 197 mile an hour range. Roger may have analyzed that the track is slower than it's going to be later in the game and want to, in effect, make use, even if it's just a fractional advantage, take that extra time now when the track is slow rather than later when it might be fast. Incidentally, there is a new record, despite the reporting the slow lap speeds, the average speed is still up at a new record. Rahal has just set it.
We're moving toward the halfway point of the race. We'll be back.
Started out as a party, but turned into a case of the missing case.
Groovy shindig.
Incredible feat.
Thank you.
Hey, quit turning out the lights!
Oh, Mickey!
It's okay, doll.
No, it's not. There's a case of Miller Lite missing.
Who took it? It had to be somebody in this room. Rodney!
Hey, guys, take it easy, will you?
Why'd you do it, Rodney? 'Cause life tastes great?
Yeah! Because life's less filthy.
Yeah!
I tell you, I didn't do it. Well, I'm not even Rodney.
You! I thought it was a costume party. Great mask, huh?
It's no mystery that there's only one light beer, Miller Lite.
But if he didn't do it, who did?
Bobby Rahal continues to lead in the Indianapolis 500. The 1 next to the names of drivers on the right side of the screen means that they are down a lap. So as you can see from this particular leaderboard, we are being told that only Bobby Rahal and Rick Mears are on the same lap. Quite frankly, the computer system which the Speedway uses says that that is not true, and that in fact there are 6 drivers on the lead lap. I believe the computer system is correct. There are still 6 drivers on the lead lap, and they are Rahal, Rears, Hogan, Unser Jr., Michael Andretti, and now we're being told that Fittipaldi has already been lapped. Danny Sullivan was in 6th place, but Sullivan just moments ago pulled into the pit in front of us, and it appears that Sullivan so far is having a rough ride in today's race. There is Rahal on the left of the screen. There is Rick Mears chasing him in the yellow car, and the gap between them seems at this moment to be closing just a little bit. You mentioned before we went away, Sam Posey, that Rahal is used to leading this race. He led it for 15 laps after starting 6th in 1983. He led for 14 laps after starting 3rd, I should say, a year ago. The view from the Goodyear blimp flying overhead, which is aloft above this speedway for the 50th time in its history. And now there are 94 laps down. So we are within 6 laps of the midway point of the race, and a pecking order seems to have been established. Mears and Rahal are certainly among those which can run toward the lead.
Yes, indeed, and it's not too surprising. Of course, we knew Mears would. We talked about Rahal at the beginning as having a chance. He was very strong toward the end of last year's racing season, winning 3 races out of the last 5 or 6. But in the past, Rahal has been slow to get going at the beginning of the season, and he's not had any luck here recently. So this is the first time we're really seeing him at Indy showing the level of skill that we are used to seeing from him the rest of the year.
Who else can run with the leaders? Well, it looks like Michael Andretti can, Kevin Kogan can, and for the moment, Al Unser Jr. can. Right now, we've got a reporter standing by with Debbie Rahal, the wife of the leader.
Jim, Debbie, of course, wishes she could take this moment, put it in a bottle, and take it home. This is an enjoyable job, charting laps when your husband is in front.
Well, it's hard to concentrate on this right now, and hopefully, I mean, it seems like at the halfway point we'll be leading, hopefully. I hope we're leading in the 200th lap.
Debbie, your husband is a very unexcitable man. How do you think his emotions would be running right now?
Well, I think Bobby's used to this kind of activity. He's very philosophical, very easygoing, so he's very calm. He knows that really, as I say, the last few laps you want to be leading, so this is fun, but...
And on the other side of the coin, how are you handling all this?
I have all the nerves in the family.
Oh, that's
I'm doing
good.
pretty well right now, though.
All right, don't tell Bobby that, Jim.
We won't. Sam?
Debbie flew as a stewardess on Aer Lingus, and that's how she happened to meet Bobby. And I never forget last year when we were interviewing her, and we asked about what it would be like if Bobby ever won the Indy 500. And she didn't say, oh, that would be nice. She said, that will be the pinnacle. I think she has enormous confidence, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if she wasn't the rock behind Bobby Rahal that allows him to be so level-headed about the way he is on and off the track.
Well, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in Gasoline Alley who does not believe that some year soon, maybe not this year, but some year soon, Bobby Rahal is going to be in victory circle at Indianapolis. Right now, he continues to lead over Rick Mears. You see that there is traffic behind him.
Yeah, but the gap is closing. Just as we're talking about Bobby, Rick is once again on his bicycle here. There's no accident that so many people pick Rick Mears because we just feel that as the track changes in character, we're going to look at the distance between Bobby Rahal there leading and Rick Mears following him there just at the top of the screen. You can see that less than, well,
all right, here comes Mears right through the middle of the screen. So he's getting some traffic behind him. That's Brabham. He's just put behind him. Fittipaldi is a little to the rear of Brabham. There is Rahal, who is well in front as Mears continues to chase him through traffic.
But you see what I mean about Mears? He's, whatever the segment of the race or the leg, I mean, it was the beginning part with Michael Andretti running really fast, then we had some yellows, but in each segment, Rick Mears has been a top runner. You see what I mean? I think that's critical because he is going to stay at the top of this race probably throughout it.
Now, when Rahal comes by the scoring tower, right now, the race is half over. 100 laps down. Bobby Rahal, 250 miles behind him, holds the lead over Rick Mears in the Indianapolis 500. For the moment, those two cars a good 16 to 17 seconds ahead of the third fastest car. That is Kevin Kogan. Fourth place belongs to Al Unser Jr., who is right there in a dice with Kevin Kogan, barely a second separating. Fifth place is Michael Andretti, who still appears to have the speed to move up from there. Look at the rest of the list. Rutherford, Garza, Vogler, Johnny Parsons, whose father won here, who's raced here 11 times, and who's never led a lap a single time in his career here. There's Danny Sullivan. He's been having a bit of difficulty today and is well back in the standings.
All right, let's look and see the difference between first and second. You see Rick Mears in the yellow car coming up to the finish line. All right, just 5 seconds. We'll be watching that. Interestingly, you mentioned the halfway point, Jim. At the halfway point, wait a minute, there's a yellow flag and there's been a wreck.
Well, that's on the
Not
back straightaway.
Well, the car has spun around. Obviously, he wound up, this is just out of turn 2, barely touching the wall if he touched it at all. At the halfway point, and just before this yellow flag, however, the pace of the race had so increased that it was a new record to that point.
Does that look like one of the white cars, Bettenhausen or Kruger? It's hard to tell precisely from here with the bright sunlight modeling the color of the car in that long lens camera shot. I'm not going to hazard a guess.
It is a March car, I can tell from the roll bar, but let's not rush the identification, although the driver looks fine.
I thought I saw something moving there in the cockpit, which would indicate that things are probably...
This even could result in a restart. I question whether he made contact with the wall.
Meanwhile, Mears is entering the pits, and some of the other cars are also finding their way onto pit row. Well, I see both of the white cars in the pits. There goes Bettenhausen, and Kruger is visible over to the left, so it does not look as though it is either one of those two.
Well, perhaps it is. Let's just wait.
Yes, let's be careful.
He's fine. They might arguably...
16.
No. Now we're going to see it.
It is Johnny Parsons in 95. I thought that car was more yellow than that. I don't think...
No, it was yellow because they bought it from Penske, but they repainted it,
yeah,
Jim.
Johnny Parsons.
So it is Johnny Parsons. It was yellow to begin with. Watch to the extreme left as he just seems to be a little wide and actually loses control. Now we'll see if he touches the wall on the outside or not. Perhaps not. Terrific. He misses the wall there. And now begins, I suppose, a fishtail kind of thing where he struggles for control. Ooh, he almost caught it. So, not entirely dissimilar from what happened to Danny Sullivan last year, except Sullivan caught it on that first fishtail. Johnny Parsons did not.
Well, now the car really takes off as it gets onto the grass, and at this point he's just trying to keep it off of the inside wall, which he has succeeded in doing so far, but there, bang.
That hurts the alignment of the car, no end. You have to send it to the alignment shop.
Been quite a month for Johnny Parsons. He did not have a ride coming here to Indianapolis, and Andy Kenapensky, the man who runs the Machinists Union team, promised Johnny Parsons that he would get him a car somehow. So they entered the bidding for what had been Rick Mears' backup car, and they won that little bidding war, got hold of the car, repainted it. Johnny Parsons qualified it. He raced for the 11th time, and he may now have finished his day. We'll be back. They're under the yellow.
Live at Indianapolis, where we're still running under a yellow flag. Here are the standings at the end of 104 laps. Bobby Rahal of Dublin, Ohio, leading the race. Then Rick Mears, the pole sitter. Kevin Kogan, who was involved in an accident before the start a few years ago. Al Unser Jr. up there. Michael Andretti, the two sons, running 4th and 5th. Rich Vogler now in a rather surprising 6th position. Then Emerson Fittipaldi, Jose La Garza of Mexico, Johnny Rutherford, Danny Sullivan, last year's winner, down in 10th place. Roberto Guerrero and A.J. Foyt up in 12th place. He continues to creep up in the standings, having started way, way back in the field. Out of the race so far, and this is the first time since 1934 that two former champions have finished last and next to last. They are Tom Sneva and Mario Andretti. Back in 34, it was Wild Bill Cummings and Fred Frame, two former winners of the race who finished in those final two positions. Scott Brayton also out on lap 72 with a turbo problem. Jim Crawford of Scotland is out of it. Tony Bettenhausen, the namesake and son of a famous racer here, is out. And Phil Kruger, you saw Johnny Parsons, whose father also won this race, is out of it for this year of 1986. The leader, however, and with a new record pace at the halfway mark, is Bobby Rahal, 33-year-old race driver from Dublin, Ohio, which is just outside Columbus. In fact, it's the town where Jack Nicklaus's famous Muirfield Village Golf Course is located. Rahal was born in Ohio, went to high school in Illinois, then graduated. Yes, he graduated from Denison College in Granville, Ohio, a school which has a very good reputation for its scholastic achievements. So Bobby Rahal, an intelligent businessman driver, has taken the lead, and his average pace is not only a record pace for the halfway mark, but is 13 miles an hour faster than Mario Andretti's record pace of last year at the 100-lap mark. It is an official race, by the way, but there's no sign of rain so far. We're still under very hot and clear conditions here, temperature in the mid-80s. Immediately following our exclusive live race coverage here, more live on ABC. On ABC's Wide World of Sports, Jerry Cooney at last on the comeback trail, and the mini marathon from New York City. All live, so stay with us. Water skiing, too.
For the moment, at an average lap speed of 199 miles per hour, Bobby Rahal is touring the Indianapolis Motor Speedway under a green flag in the lead after 108 laps of the 200-lap Indianapolis 500. Behind him in second place is Kevin Kogan for the moment. Al Unser Jr. is third, Rick Mears fourth, Michael Andretti fifth, and my belief at this moment, Sam Posey, is when you talk about the race from a competitive standpoint, right now, you are talking about those 5 cars. Kogan, Mears, Michael Andretti, Al Unser Jr., and perhaps, most of all, Bobby Rahal.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about those 5 cars, you see the relationship here between first and second. You're also talking about 5 crews that are backing them up in the pits that are not only quick men with the wrenches and changing tires and refueling, but very quick with their intelligence. Each of these teams has an engineer represented there. And in the case of Rahal's car, we spoke about Bobby being a sort of briefcase kind of guy. Well, it's not coincidental that his team is connected, the Jim Truman team is connected with a computer company that is working out programs to optimize the performance of his car. Now, these computer companies from Cambridge, Massachusetts, out to the Silicon Valley are becoming increasingly involved in IndyCar racing. And I think that, you're always thinking, what is the next great leap forward? I mean, it was ground effect, which sucked the cars to the road a few years ago, wings before that, wider tires before that. Now, all of a sudden, it may be this advanced computer technology. There's the gap, of course. Rahal is probably hearing that on the radio as well, the Debbie timing in the pits. But I think that the computer technology, which represents an artificial intelligence aboard the car, may be the wave of the future.
Very important for Rahal to know, of course, as he has now been informed, that it is Kogan behind him in second place and no longer Mears. I was briefly disappointed, incidentally, to see that our man Phil Kruger is out of the race, but he did go 67 laps in his car, which I don't think the grilled halibut he shaped into the shape of the car for you in 1971 would have been able to do.
I'm awfully happy to see him out of the race in one piece, though. All right, interestingly, with Rahal leading Kogan, you have a replay of the situation that went on about 8 years ago when both these men were just beginning their careers. They used to race against Gilles Villeneuve, the great Formula One driver who was killed a few years ago up in Canada in a series called Formula Atlantic. So it's funny that these 2 men who used to play to those small Canadian but very enthusiastic Canadian crowds are now doing the same thing in front of this gigantic Indianapolis crowd. And Larry Newber, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. And this, Sam, represents the current standings in the pit crew competition, as you can see. Now, not only is Rahal leading the race, but he also has his crew leading the pit stop competition. 1 minute and 55 total seconds in the pits. You can see Emerson Fittipaldi, Gary Rabazzini, the crew chief there. They are tied with Bobby Rahal, though they're behind him on the racetrack. Dennis Swan is just 1 second behind, as is Peter Parrott for Rick Mears, and 2 seconds behind is Clive Howell for Al Unser. Now, the difference in this is not just the amount of time they're stopped in the pit. This times them from the moment they enter the pits to the exit. So it's a little more graphic than just that time, the actual stop time.
Indeed, Larry, but the 2-second difference among the top 5 teams demonstrates the degree to which this has been made a science.
Well, this is true, except that 2 seconds at 200 miles an hour translates into exactly 600 feet. All right, now, how does 600 feet look to you right now as a racing driver? You'd a lot rather have it than not have it, wouldn't you? So, indeed, what happens in the pits, as precise as everyone is there, is still a very critical part of the total picture.
Now there comes Mears right on the rear end of Kogan, but Kogan for the moment appears capable of holding him off. They're in a tight battle for second and third, and both of them chasing the leader, Bobby Rahal. Rahal, like all of the drivers here, tends to downplay the significance of danger in this pursuit. Nevertheless, we asked him to reflect for a little bit on the aspects of danger in driving and how, if any way, they affect him.
There's an aspect of danger to it, but I think it's overblown to a large degree. You know, I think let's face it, I mean, if you really think about life, I mean, there's a lot of risk in life. Just driving down the street, taking a shower. I mean, if you ever sat and thought about all the ways one could perish, I mean, you'd go crazy. You probably wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning because you'd be so afraid. I've never really worried about that. You know, I feel if I do my job, that I'm with a good team. I'm not in junk cars where things have fall off or things of that nature. And certainly that's always a possibility. But the better the team you're with, that possibility becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And the more you're racing, you become a bit more, let's say that when you're real young, maybe you take bigger chances, or you're willing to risk more, period. But usually the people who win are able to balance out the risks, and they know when to take the chance and when not to, and with age comes wisdom.
And with an increasing lap count under their belts comes the challenge once again of Rick Mears. While Bobby Rahal was speaking, you may have seen in the corner of your screen, Mears moved by Kevin Kogan into second place, and then as Rahal got past George Snyder and lapped him, Mears moved up even closer on Rahal. So now the two-car battle is once again set. Rahal leading, Mears dogging him in the rearview mirror.
Yes, but the race is like an accordion at this point because Michael Andretti is closing in on fourth place. So all of the leaders are sort of compressing themselves. Mears tactically is in the superior position. He's closing on Rahal, as you pointed out. But you'll notice when he gets really close behind him, it's harder for him. In other words, I think right now Rick has remained at roughly the same distance behind Bobby for a few laps, watching and seeing things develop and taking his time about it.
It is a day for the second and indeed the third generation of present-day IndyCar drivers. The five leaders range in age from 23 up to 34 years old. Now Jack Arute with Roger Penske.
And many gentlemen say he's the first chair, the mastermind in IndyCar racing today. A tough run, though, Roger. You've had to play some strategy so far.
Well, I think that, this is the time during the race where we got to use our head. We're trying to get the stagger right on the tires. It depends on what we have. We have too much oversteer, but so far so good. As I told Rick, let's be careful in the traffic, and he and Rahal are running right together, so there's four cars on the same lap, so we're really racing five guys right now, and it's quite a ways to go, so I got my fingers crossed.
What's the biggest input that you can give to the team right now, Roger, standing here on pit wall?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you?
What's the biggest input that you can give to the team standing here on pit wall?
Well, we just have to be sure we know what we do on each stop, and that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that's indeed what he's trying to do, and he's doing a pretty good job.
He is indeed. All three of his cars remain in the race, and most importantly, Rick Mears remains in the hunt for his third Indianapolis 500 champion. There's Kevin Kogan right on the rear of Mears, and Kogan is showing that he has the speed to compete in this group. I think there really are five cars that can do it, Sam Posey. We worried for a while about Michael Andretti, but now he has moved back and gone ahead of Al Unser Jr. into fourth place.
Well, now we're going to see some of the dicing that I was talking about and how it's affected by the turbulence. Watch, every time Kogan gets right behind Mears, he then has to fade back because the turbulence coming off the back of Mears' car is so great that Kogan can't get a proper bite in the air with his wings, and he drops back. In other words, when you come up to make a pass, you have to make it then. You can't just come up and trail a guy a car length behind. It has to be a decisive move which carries you by or else there isn't enough clear air behind that car to enable you to control your car properly. So I would say right now, Kevin Cogan, like a boxer who's taken a flurry of punches, has backed off and is doing a little pedaling here for a few minutes. We'll probably see him come at it again.
Meanwhile, there at the bottom of the screen, you saw Bobby Rahal, who's still in the lead. You might expect, incidentally, the stock car racers of that great form of racing to be rooting for Bobby today. They have a certain kinship with him. In fact, Terry Labonte and Darrell Waltrip and Richard Petty visited here early in practice and spent some time in his garage with the man they call Bobby Ray Hall. There's Chris Bowen on the left in the Mears pit. Let's be clear in calling her girlfriend, and not the higher status that I accorded to earlier, Debbie Rahal on the right. She may yet achieve that status, of course, but
let's hope so. She's a wonderful person. Very much like Rick Mears, by the way. Totally informal, not given to posing by the pool. She's always working at something. A really neat person. They're a great pair.
Well, now, you have often pointed out to me the difference in Mears' background compared to the other men he's racing here. Most of these men have seasoned themselves in road racing or oval racing. Rick Mears really comes from something far different.
Well, we talked, of course, about Rahal and Cogan just moments ago, coming from road racing. Rick Mears came from a branch of racing called off-road racing, which consists of usually going up and down the Baja Peninsula, south of California there, over rocks, through cactuses, through the most gruesome terrain. The races there are often anywhere from 10 hours to 24 hours in length, and sometimes the driver will go the entire distance. There's the pass. Cogan flew right past Mears, making... It's hard to say, making you wonder. He's right behind Lyondike now. It's as if Cogan just ignited there. That's what I was talking about. I mean, if you're going to make a move, you have to make it decisively. But has Mears slowed is more my question, because it's almost as if Mears or Cogan pulled out around Mears more than anything else. You know what I mean?
You can almost feel the confidence with which